Thank you, Kayla. Welcome to the November meeting of the Lynbrook Board of Education. As we always do, please rise for the pledge of the flag. Mr. Yeager, if you can lead us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Danino and Mrs. Marcus are participating remotely this evening. I'd like to have a motion to accept the minutes of the October 14th meeting. Mr. Yeager, second. Mrs. Hanson, all in favor? No, thank you. One of the things we've missed out on is the art gallery since we've begun in this limited format. So since we cannot showcase the art gallery in person this year, we are bringing it to you on video. On this video, Mr. Kunz will introduce the exhibit, Design a Line, for Ms. Goulet's fashion design students. If you could play the clip now.
The Byrne-Seidemann Gallery is proud to present its first online gallery exhibit for the 2020-2021 school year entitled Design a Line. The work on display features the amazing t-shirt surface designs and board layouts from Mrs. Goulet's fashion design students. For the project, students used printmaking techniques to create their backgrounds and then found graphics and other images from magazines to embellish their designs further. They created many options and then edited them to create their line. In addition to designing their line, the students were to design a hang tag to create their brand identity. Through this project, the students learned the importance of creating their clothing line in a preview board form in order to get feedback from the customer and to make changes before any samples are made. Following this work, the students will illustrate their garments on the figure using fashion croquis. Please take a moment to look through and share with friends and family this month's online gallery featuring Design a Line.
Thank you. Dr. Burek, I believe I have a teacher recognition this evening.
Yes, every month we like to recognize either a student or a teacher for something that has been above and beyond what their normal work is. And this month I'm pleased to recognize Miss Maddie Torres. That's a familiar name to you because we actually recognized her last year as a You Go the Distance recipient. Especially in this time of budgetary constraints, finding ways to bring in additional money, no matter how small it is helpful to help keep our programs running. So Ms. Torres had actually applied for the New York State TESOL Teachers Materials Grant, and she won. She won out of New York State and was provided the funding for the ENL student classroom learning materials and other teacher-related materials to enrich students' language, academic, and cultural learning experiences. The next generation learning standards, as well as the high standards that we hold for ourselves in Lynbrook, highlights the importance of promoting an equitable education for all while building proficiency in English. ELLs and MLLs in English as a new language program demonstrate skills bilingually or transfer linguistic knowledge across languages. So we want to recognize Mrs. Torres for taking that extra step, applying for this grant, and winning the grant and bringing the money back to help support our ENL program. So congratulations, Mrs. Torres.
Just a follow-up on that. I met Maddie this summer when we were volunteering to give out meals and is it working? Yes. I'm good?
Just speak loudly.
I met Ms. Torres this summer and just volunteering to give out meals. It was fantastic, and she's a great person, and I really enjoyed chatting with her this summer.
Thank you, Mrs. Casco, Dr. Burek. Moving on, we have 2 retirements this evening. Always bittersweet for the district. Always makes us a little sad when we lose people who have been here so long and meant so much to us, but we are happy for them to be able to enjoy that next phase of their life. Mr. Yaker, if you can read the first retirement.
Mrs. Dorothy McCarthy. Whereas Mrs. Dorothy McCarthy, teacher in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective January 29th, 2021, after 34 years as a physical education and health educator in the Lynbrook Public Schools. And whereas Mrs. McCarthy, hired in 1986 as a part-time phys ed teacher, became a full-time in 1987, successfully teaching PE and health at South Middle School, where her energy, expertise, and wonderful ability to connect with students blossomed. And whereas, after moving to the high school in 2000, as a teacher of PE grade 9, PE co-ed team, health, dance, and yoga, Mrs. McCarthy inspired her students to live full, balanced, and healthy lives through her effective classroom practices and anecdotes that imbued daily lessons with real-world relevance. And whereas, as the founder of Lynbrook High School's dance and yoga programs, Mrs. McCarthy brought a level of energy and expertise that made these classes some of those popular electives LHS offered, and even garnered her with recognition as Elks Teacher of the Year, Nassau County Dance Educator of the Year, and New York State Dance Educator of the Year honors. And whereas, as a participant in or leader of countless school and community efforts, including Challenge Day, Class Night, Sports Night, the Lincoln Center Project, Relay for Life, the Lynbrook Community Coalition, the Senior Dinner, the AIDS Walk, Character Education Committee, National Women in Sports Day, and Teacher Talent Shows, Mrs. McCarthy demonstrated daily that connecting with and helping her students, colleagues, and community was a priority. And whereas, as mentor, friend, and confidant to her students and colleagues, Mrs. McCarthy's concern for the welfare of others contributed immensely to the family feel that is a hallmark of our school community. And whereas, in describing Mrs. McCarthy, colleagues wrote, "Our district has been fortunate to have many excellent teachers, and even more fortunate to have had Dorothy McCarthy as part of the Lynbrook family. Not only is she a great teacher, but a valued mentor, an even-keeled voice in our department, and a friend who makes it a priority to listen." And whereas, as an educator who cared deeply about the welfare of children, as a role model who lived each day fully and present with each and every individual she met, and as someone who lived the adage, the more one gives, the more one receives, Dorothy McCarthy has left an indelible mark on LHS and the Lynbrook schools. And whereas the Board of Education thanks Mrs. Dorothy McCarthy for all she has given to the students and staff of Lynbrook High School, for serving so well and as an exemplary educator, and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement with plenty of time to pursue her many and varied interests in the company of her husband Kevin and daughters Megan, Maureen, and Tara, traveling and visiting her large and extended family. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mrs. Dorothy McCarthy for purposes of retirement. And on a personal note, we are losing a great educator. I've known Ms. McCarthy for, well, for a very long time. And I certainly appreciate your service to the district and to my own children and to me when I was in school as well. So congratulations.
Kayla, we good? Sure. Yeah, so board members, when you are speaking, speak into the mic. They're not as sensitive as we like them to be, and if you're anywhere but more than a couple of inches away. I think he might have been off the mic when he was talking.
I don't hear it.
It's okay. Then we'll get there.
Oh, he's reading.
I think he's pretty good. I think he's just got to talk a little bit.
Good to go?
A little bit louder. You're
There you
good.
go.
Just a little closer, a little louder.
Okay. Thank you.
They read the wrong thing.
Okay, we have another retirement. Mr. Pascoff will read the resolution.
Linda Vey. Is Linda here?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Whereas Miss Linda Vey, special education teacher in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective January 29th, 2021, after 30 years of service to the Lynbrook schools. And whereas Ms. Vey, who joined the staff of the high school in 1991 as a leave replacement teacher, returned to LHS in 1993, again in a leave replacement position. The following year, Ms. Vey became a full-time member of the Lynbrook High School staff, delivering well-prepared and differentiated instruction with warmth, wit, and care. And whereas Ms. Vey, understanding the needs of each child well, curriculum in the English, global history, inclusion, living, environment, earth and the environment, special class, resource room class. And whereas during these many years, with great devotion, patience, compassion, professionalism, Linda worked successfully with countless students who, after graduating, often returned to LHS to tell her how profoundly positively and jovially she had impacted their lives. And whereas whether workshops or training sessions in Kurzweil, Sims, IEP writing, math camp, transitioning, or the inclusion model, or as moderator or member of the high school building safety committee, Students Against Destructive Decisions, as Human Relations Day presenter and accommodations coordinator for June testing, Linda Vey's commitment to the Lynbrook school community was ever present and earned her recognition from the Lynbrook Council of PTAs. And whereas one student of Ms. Vey wrote, "Ms. Vey has the ability to reach me unlike any other teacher I have ever had. She always helps me find better ways of learning. If I'm not feeling well when I come to class, I begin to feel better the minute I say good morning to her. Her sense of humor tops all teachers I know." And whereas, as one colleague wrote, "When I first met Linda, I heard her speaking about her summer trip to Africa, and I thought, wow, this woman is so cool. 7 years later, I still think of Miss Vey the same way. Jackie Cook and I would participate in her Flashback Fridays with her and her class. The students loved her because she made learning fun while being a solid support system for them. I believe all of the roles she has played during her time as an educator has helped make her the caring and compassionate teacher and person she is." And whereas the Board of Education thanks Linda Vey for her years of dedicated service and for sharing her expertise, warmth, and good humor with literally thousands of Lynbrook students. And whereas the Board of Education wishes Miss Vey a happy and healthy retirement, filled with travel, sunshine, and ocean breezes with Steve Freifeld and sons Jonathan and Daniel. Now, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Miss Linda Vey for purposes of retirement.
Congratulations to both of you, and we always take a few moments at this time to allow the retirees and their guests to leave and celebrate. So please feel free to do so if you so choose.
Except you can't go out anyway.
As we move on to correspondence to the board, before Mr. Paskoff reads that, I want to again reinforce, we've made some changes to the website. Well, the website's been that way, but it also says on the automatic reply, the board tries very diligently to stay as transparent as possible and works on communication with the community. A couple of years, that was one of the issues that was brought to our attention, and there was drastic changes made about 2 years ago with constant information being sent out from the principals, from the administration, and the board. Now, of course, we have these meetings, which if you don't attend live, you're able to watch recordings of the meetings to gather the really only accurate information you're going to have about what action the board's taking. But it's important to understand we try to get to as many emails as we can, but the board only meets once a month, sometimes twice now during COVID with our work sessions, and when emails come in, the board has to sit and discuss it as a group to decide what the response would be. But the overwhelming number of those emails are really more appropriately directed to operational staff in the district. Most of them should be directed either to students' teachers or the principal. So we've altered the automatic response to indicate that to those of you. So if you don't get a response back other than that email, that's an indication that either one, a lot of times people are calling up just to vent or to give us compliments which don't require a response, or other times they're more appropriately directed towards district personnel, which we hope you'll take the time to identify the relevant person, typically your student's teacher or principal. And at this time, Mr. Paskoff, if you can address the correspondence to the board.
Sure. Being it's only a week from our last meeting, we only had 3 emails. We had one from a parent regarding remote learners and New York State certified teachers. We had one from a parent regarding passing time between classes, and one from a resident regarding curriculum.
Thank you, Mr. Paskoff. Moving on to report from trustee, the policy committee. Mr. Pileski, if you could address 2 of the first readings we have tonight.
Sure. We are talking about 2 policies tonight. The first one is policy 5100, that is student attendance. Students, back in March and April, when we started our remote teaching, students were marked present if work was completed within 3 days. That, because of what we're doing now, is no longer needed. We now have a live remote instruction, so if students are present, they are marked present. If they're out, they're out, okay? There was also policy 6680, that is our fund balance revision. Revision of this fund balance eliminates the building renovation fund, as it no longer exists because all of that money was transferred to the high school project and the actual project going on now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Plessy, on that update. As we move on to old business, and Dr. Burak will begin by talking about the work of our task force, it's important that we again reinforce what's been taking place over the last 7 or 8 months since COVID began. So the improvements have been drastic in this district in not only the response to how we're handling the safety of our students and staff, but the academic process, the manner in which we had teachers in the beginning that were trying to adapt themselves to technology and have made unbelievable leaps and bounds to get on top of that technology and begin to and continue to teach our kids. And it's flexible. We said this back in the beginning of the year. We knew it would be fluid. We'd be opening. We may have to close for a couple of days. But as this board has said from the beginning, and we've been monitoring this since it began last spring, throughout the summer, weekly meetings, constantly staying on top of the information. We began the school year to see how things went. We got together, made decisions, got the community involved with the task force and our staff and other people to see what the changes could be made, and Dr. Burak's going to address that now. But we can't help but continue to stress, and Dr. Burak will go into it more specifically, about the importance to maintain safety measures, social distancing, and mask wearing when you're outside the school. This board has said from the beginning, our goal is to keep the school open. Our goal is to put as many kids into the school as we can safely, and that's the job that we're doing. But a lot of things are taking place in our community that are making that very difficult. And again, Dr. Burak will address that further, but it's important to understand that is our goal. As soon as the state and the health department allows us to, we'll get back to a place where we were previously. We were benefiting from having full-time teaching, and that's our hope. But that's only going to work if everyone participates in that process. And Dr. Burak, if you can please address some of the issues. And again, before you get into that, so what happened was we began the school year. We wanted to see how things were. We were monitoring it. Decision was made that the best way to get a sense of how things are going is to get our task force involved so we can get different stakeholders in our community and our schools involved in what changes we can make. So just 1 month into the school year, Dr. Burak convened that group, and today will be the culmination of their efforts and the recommendations they're making to the board.
Thank you. So tonight, we're going to give a formal presentation of the task force Phase 3. As I said to the task force on Friday afternoon when we met together as a collective body, it's been wonderful that we've had different voices since the March beginning of the pandemic. We had a spring reopening task force. That turned out to be Phase 1. At that point, we didn't know there were going to be multiple phases, but that was Phase 1, and we heard from different voices to help guide us in what our next steps would be. Over the summer, we had Phase 2 of our reopening task force, where we got to hear more voices from different members of the community. And now, once again, as Mr. Belmont just said, in October we reconvened again to see how we can bring more students back. So I want to publicly thank everyone on this task force phase 3 because there was wonderful dialogue, there was great representation, went back and forth, there were visitations, as we mentioned last week at the work session, and we really, it boils down to, it's a compromise. You know, everyone, when you sit on a committee, there's a compromise to try to move the district forward. And since reopening, reviewing our reopening plan is a goal of the board, this is going to be an ongoing process for us. So this was just yet another phase in the evaluation of our reopening plan. So this evening, we're going to give formal recommendations to the board to accept or reject so that we can move forward to try to bring more students back. I'm going to, Kayla, ask you to move on to the goals and priorities. When we first met as a task force, the ultimate goal that I had shared was that we want to return as many students as we can to in-person learning. And the task force would need to do a couple of things in order to make this happen, and that is truly assess the facilities. We had discussed that our buildings are very old buildings. The high school is a 100-year-old building. Most of the classrooms are 500 some odd square feet that, quite frankly, when the reopening plan was put together and trying to adhere to the CDC guidelines at the time, which always change, it was very difficult in the amount of students we could actually fit in the classroom at the time. So they had to reassess the facilities across the district. They reviewed the health and safety protocols, and then based on the recommendations of a subcommittee that dealt with that, we needed to evaluate and discuss possible changes in the instructional program that was outlined in the original reopening plan. So those were tasks, that was goals that needed to take place. But then I also asked for priorities. So we wanted to, and we know that the issue was green remote learners, we wanted to be able to now give them an option to come back. So that was one of the priorities, to give them an opportunity to request in-person learning. The next priority was to provide more support for students with various special needs, whether they were students with IEPs or ENLs students, but students at risk who would need extra support in the classroom. So those were two priorities as we move forward towards bringing all students back to in-person learning. So based on those goals, the subcommittees went on their work, and we have finally reached these recommendations. So I'm going to ask Dr. Balekis to go over the task force recommendations for the elementary level.
Thank you, Dr. Burak. I also have to say thank you to Dr. Lynch and the Facilities Health and Safety Committee. All of the recommendations that come from the instructional subgroup are based on their hard work. I know that they spent a lot of time going throughout the district checking to see what measurements would be acceptable and make everyone feel safe. So I know that there was a lot of work in remeasuring each of the rooms at a 4.5-foot front to back distance. That really means that we're measuring pretty much from the nose of one child to the nose of the next child. So it is not a measurement between the chair and the front of the desk. It is to the same point. So it's from the center point to the center point. The 5-foot distance is measured side to side. So we're talking, you know, as the children would reach out, it would be 5 feet from their nose again to the other child's nose, not from the edges of the desks. So that was considered the ideal measurements. So based on those measurements, and we had also conducted a survey as a district to see how many of our green students right now, so those that are learning at home, would be interested in returning to school and receiving in-person instruction. So we were happy to find out that if we move the classes around, we may need to rearrange some of the teachers. We should be able to accommodate all requests in most of our buildings that students can return to their home schools. So the kindergarten center, Waverly Park, and Marion Street schools could actually return those students into our existing classrooms. We do have the space for them. At West End School, there may be, depending again on how many children decide to come back, a little bit of an issue that we need to open up more sections. So what we would do, we would take some spaces that we're not currently using for instruction and open up additional classrooms. It may require up to 3 new spaces, and we should be able to work that out so that the West End students could also return to their home school. That is really all based upon the numbers that we received in our survey. So this time we took a very conservative approach. We added the children who said they were definitely coming back to the children that might come back, and use that as our number of the children who want to return. The only group that we excluded were the children who said they definitively did not want to return under any circumstances. So that is how we basically work the numbers. When we started to play with the sections and such, it is easy enough, obviously, when you're enrolled in a new class in person and you're joining that class, to figure out your specials, because they would be attending with that new class. We're not 100% certain until we open up the new sections how their specials will work. They may need to be provided remotely. Currently, we do have some classes that are in person right now that do receive specials remotely at the elementary level, and we have similar situations in the middle school and the high school as well. So it's not foreign to us, but it is something that we do need to make you aware of. Also, too, when I'm saying rearranging teachers and classes, there are several reasons why that may happen. You know, if we are returning children from the remote sections, there may be not enough children to support 2 sections on a grade level anymore. So those classes may be collapsed into one. And if we're opening up new sections at West End, we need folks to teach those classes. So some of those remote teachers may come back as the in-person teachers at West End School. There is also a possibility that given the new measurements and such, that some staff members that are medically fragile may decide that they want to teach remotely. So that may also cause some shuffling of teachers. So there's all different reasons why we may be rearranging teachers and classes. The other piece that obviously we would need to work out logistics on, and again, because of the nature of these services, we have services such as reading and speech where kids are grouped according to need. If they've been with a specific group by need at home, we may need to do some of those services remotely, so we keep the kids that are on the same level, readers, together and so on. So there are some things like that that we will work out, you know, when the children do return. Another piece that came up at the elementary level, right now we currently have a half-hour drop-off time. You know, when we first opened up school, that was imperative to get the kids in safely. We were still trying to figure out the logistics and the spacing and all of those type of things. At this point in time, you know, our drop-offs have become very standardized. They are kind of like a machine now. Many people were thinking that we could recover some time in the classrooms and cut that back down to 15 minutes. So we could limit the drop-off time at the elementary school to the 8:30 to 8:45 time slot, which would allow the kids to get into classes a little bit earlier. So those were the recommendations at the elementary level, and I'd like to move on to the middle school level. Kayla, thank you. So at the middle school
Dr.
level,
Willett, just any questions we'll hold to the end. We'll address them all at once, just so we can kind of tie it in and summarize it.
okay. So at the middle school level, we had talked about who we should prioritize to bring back. I know that Dr. Bjork in the beginning had said that we were talking about 2 groups of children in particular, children with some type of special need and children who are fully remote in the green program right now. At the instructional committee, we decided that it was very important to return children with special needs or who are at risk. When I say special needs, I have to be very careful. I'm not talking about just students with IEPs. We are also talking about other students, as is English language learners, the kids that are at risk. We have meetings all the time in the middle schools with our ISTs, our instructional support teams, where we talk about children who are at risk of failing or having real social emotional learning type issues, and we are actually bringing them back currently. I do thank the board for the permission at the work session last week to start that process. So I am happy to report that that has begun, and we do have children who have been returning to school, and I think many of the families who were watching their children struggling at home were very appreciative of those phone calls, so I do thank you for that. Like we had mentioned in the elementary school, that same measurement is going to carry through the middle school and the high school of the 4.5 to 5 feet, the same measurement, same way it's being done. What that would allow, you know, that does allow us a little bit more room in each classroom. So basically, based on the classroom sizes and the availability of seats, we are fairly confident that we're going to be able to return any of the students on the green program that would like to return to the hybrid program, the blue program, so that they can be every other day in person. When I say that with a little bit of a caveat there, There are a few sections in particular, and I'm talking about a very limited number of sections where we may have, if everybody said yes to us, 1 or 2 extra kids in the class, but that is going on the assumption that everyone says yes. Unfortunately, our survey data at the middle school and the high school, when we gave out that survey, was limited. The response rate was very low. At the elementary school, we almost had a 100% response rate. At the middle school and the high school, it was sporadic at best, so we really don't have significant numbers to work from. But, you know, given the fact that we did start inviting, like I said, some of the special needs and at-risk students in, and they've been turning us down, there's a good chance that, you know, there will be other children, I'm assuming, in the green program that turn us down. So even if we have a very small number turn us down, we should be able to fit the children that want to return at the middle school on that, you know, from the green model to the hybrid. Again, similar to the elementary schools, there may be some changes in schedules necessary. We may have to be creative that, you know, you may be, you might have a last name with A through L, but my room is in M to Z. So you may not be able to return with the kids on your side of the alphabet. You may be returning on the other side of the alphabet. There is some creativity that may need to happen. You know, as we get the names, and this is why it's important that we put out another survey, which I know Dr. Burak will talk about later in the next steps. When we put out the next survey, which is a commitment, when we have those commitments, we'll be able to know who needs to go where to make all the logistics work. So that's very important for us to do. At the middle school level also, just to mention it, we may need to change some people's schedules. The one good thing about a change of schedule in a middle school is that, you know, you pretty much have the same teachers anyway. I may have, you know, Mr. Belmont for period 2 English right now. I may have to put him in period 4 because that's where I have more room. But the good thing is that for the most part in the middle school, we are just shuffling periods, you're not changing teachers midstream. So that is something that, you know, again, would be a possibility. One of the other pieces that did come up, right now we are currently sitting at 10 minutes of passing time. After much discussion, you know, and there was debate back and forth about what the ideal number should be, we settled in on 8 minutes of passing time. You know, why 8 minutes? Is that it does reduce the amount of time from the 10 minutes to the 8 minutes. So if we recover 2 minutes in each period, times 5 days a week, we're talking about 10 minutes of instruction a day. Sorry, 10 minutes a week. 10 minutes a week times about 4 weeks in a month. We're talking about recovering about a period of instruction a month, which people were happy about getting that extra instructional time back. What it wasn't reduced any further is that we do have people that need to get into classrooms, both students and teachers. If we're increasing the number of kids in the building, we do need to give them some time to still get back into the classrooms. There are teachers who travel between rooms. There are teachers who travel between rooms who have to get their WebEx or their Teams up and running and get out their supplies. Because when you're art or science, you do have supplies that you need to hand out. And you know, they do need time for those things. Even at the 8 minutes, it should be expected that there are certain classes that may take a minute or 2 to get up and running. So, you know, even though we're saying 8 minutes, please be patient with teachers who are trying to get all those logistics done. It may take them a little bit of time to get up and running, and we all need to be patient. I know that we've used the word flexibility this year a lot, and we do need to be flexible with that. The other piece that did come up, and I know that we received correspondence in the district from parents about this as well, is that there are kids at home that are taking screen breaks, and we do want to still give them that opportunity to separate from the screen, especially when, you know, they're going from period to period. It does give them that little bit of time to take their eyes off the screen if they so choose. We still do need to continue to discuss the plan to fully eliminate the hybrid and return all students. We had mentioned that at our committee is obviously an ultimate goal. We were not at the point where we were ready to define what that would look like and what the triggers for that would be. But you know, we will need to return to that at some point so that we can discuss how we can safely bring back all those that want to return to our schools. Kayla, if we can move on to the high school, please. So at the high school level, again, same measurements as the other 2 levels. We have prioritized the special needs students and those who are at risk. You know, as I mentioned earlier, thank you for doing that. You know, this has been something that the high school has begun working on. It did take a little bit longer at the high school, and I just want to let families that are receiving these phone calls know we didn't forget about you. Unfortunately, with some of the contact tracing that was going on last week, we did need to prioritize that before we could make some of these phone calls. So these phone calls are still in the process of happening, and we are discussing children that, in addition to those with special needs, meaning the students with the IEPs and those that have English language needs and so on. We are discussing those kids at the IST meetings as well who are at risk. Unfortunately, based on the recommendations from the facilities group, we're not at a point where we can bring back all of the green students at the moment. They are continuing to explore the physical layout of the individual rooms. As Dr. Burak said, unfortunately, this high school is old. We have some very small rooms in the high school. Some of them have irregular shapes or heaters that jut into the room, and it does make the play within the room a little bit more difficult to fit additional desks. So that is something that we will continue to look at, and we do look forward to getting more recommendations about the facilities and what we're able to do there to try to bring back some of the green students to the hybrid model. We will continue also to monitor how many of our students who are in the hybrid model decide to go full remote. So again, that commitment is very important because it's going to allow us to know which direction people intend to go, so that when we are playing with real numbers and have names attached to them, we can look at individual schedules and maybe start making changes based on what we see. Same thing that we talked about at the middle school, and same reasons. We are moving the existing 10 minutes of passing time to 8 minutes. And again, similar to the middle schools, we are still interested in talking about how to eliminate the hybrid model altogether and bring students back, but we're just not at a place where we're able to make a recommendation regarding that at the moment. Thank you, Dr. Barrett.
Thank you, Dr. Belekas. So now moving on to next steps. Obviously, we need the furniture in order to house the additional students in the district. Just keep in mind, if you're thinking, well, why don't you have the desks because the students were here last year, we have allocated desks in the gymnasiums to be used during the cafeteria time. So students are eating on those desks in the gymnasiums. So we need to order desks and additional barriers. It says that there's an approximate 6 weeks. However, we have ordered them. So already 1 week into that, we did not wait for the approval of this in the hopes that the board was going to support it. So we wanted to get moving as quickly as possible. So everything has been ordered. The next thing is the collection of commitments now from the elementary and middle school parents and all secondary level parents actually also for their choices for the rest of the year. So I just want to alert everyone, tomorrow you will be receiving yet another Parent Link message from me. It will ask you to go to the district website to view a letter. In the letter, we have bulleted all of the parameters that are necessary for you to think about what your choice is. I think at this point, everyone really knows what they want, so we just need that information from you. But we wanted to truly disclose everything with regard to the distance of the desks, everything that Dr. Belekas just mentioned, which was possible scheduling changes, possible teacher changes, and everything that would make the environment different for the students once the change is made. So we're asking for that survey to be filled out, one for each child, so you can make your selection if you're going from green to gold or even gold to green at this point on the elementary level, because you may decide now with infection rate going up or with some of these changes, you may want to go to remote, and we would understand that. But we would like the response to be received by the district by Monday, November 23rd. This way we can start moving. There's a tremendous amount of work now as far as the principals doing the scheduling work, taking all of that into consideration and putting students, allocating them in the classrooms. Dr. Belekas did mention that West End, there needs to be some room creation because we're going to be creating sections. You should also know that one of the rooms we needed to actually build a wall to create a classroom, and that wall has already been built, and we're putting on the finishing touches. So we are moving swiftly to do our best to get everyone in as quickly as possible. So
Dr. Burek, what is the manner in which, other than this board now, is this, yeah, it's on, other than now announcing that survey and the timeline for Monday, how are we pushing that information out? Is the PTA using their email list? It's on the website? What is the different manners in which we're informing?
It's going to be on the website. And in the letter, there were 2 links, one for elementary and one for secondary level, and we're asking families to answer the survey for each child in the district.
And will it go out as one of those phone calls, text messaging?
Yes.
So those things that everyone complains about, because I get like 6 of those a day, the importance of that is for situations like this.
I don't think it's on.
I didn't turn it on.
Lost his battery.
Kayla? There we
There
go.
you go.
So, one of the have to assume they're the status quo. If they don't
Right,
respond.
well, that's actually in the letter. I
Right.
tried to
I'm saying, so
disclose
if they don't
everything in the
have-
letter. If we don't hear from you, your current instructional model will remain.
Right, but it's important to understand that the reason why we inform, because we've talked about communication being so important, is you receive this in a variety of different methods, especially for something this important, because you need to be able to have your voice in what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, then the next step would be, as Dr. Belekas mentioned, there's still work to be done on the high school level. This building is a very tricky building, so we're going to continue to look at the high school facilities and see what we can do to open up more seats on the high school level. As always, we're going to continue to monitor the progress of the pandemic conditions and see where it's going. As you can see, it is increasing. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when I do my superintendent's report. But obviously, we need to talk about of what it's going to be, as Dr. Belekas mentioned, what's the metric to bring everyone back and what changes. So to that end, we're going to, I'll announce it now, we will reconvene yet another task force, phase 4 of the task force in December, to quite frankly evaluate the progress of how our changes that we're recommending tonight and how they went along, as well as discuss the bringing back of all students and what we can do. And then obviously we will reassess the plan as the year goes on and make adjustments as necessary. So those are the recommendations right now of the task force for the board to give us the official nod if you're in support of moving in that direction. We have made some moves already because time is limited, so we wanted to get going. So I just put it off to the board now.
Well, again, as we always say, pretty impressive with how quickly we've moved on this, convened the board in a matter of weeks. We're able to gather this information, make the measurements, and make those changes. Dr. Bless, I assume the LTA and our teachers were involved in this process and had a voice in these recommendations?
Yes. Yes, they have.
Yes, they have. Actually, they were mostly on Dr. Lynch's.
Right, I mean, they're a big part of what we're doing, so to make sure they had their buy-in part of the process,
Yep.
that's good to know. And so, Dr. Belekas, as far as the curriculum part of it, one of our concerns we're trying to get in, because our goal is, the end goal is as quickly as we can, as much as we can, to get as many kids as we can back into the buildings to educate them. So we opened up the school. We saw the possibility that there was people that wanted their kids into school, and it looks like we've done a decent job to what limits we can right now of addressing that issue. And so just to make sure I understand, in the elementary school, seems to have one of the best results. So anybody that was on remote and wanted to come back in has the ability to do that now.
Yes, that is what we're working on. So as soon as we can get the materials in necessary, we can arrange that. So it's just a matter of getting in these barriers that you see in front of you and the necessary desks.
And then high school obviously being the most difficult, but even in the situations where some of these arrangements were difficult, our most vulnerable population is the one we're addressing as a priority to get them back in, to get them the best education they can have.
Yes, we're actually looking at students, as we speak, and are checking out their individual schedules, and individual families are receiving phone calls, daily to, hear that they have an option, at least to send their child back full time.
In addition to this, as I understand, this process actually, Dr. Lynch, involved actually taking out a tape measure and
Absolutely,
going
yep.
almost classroom by classroom and literally being that specific and understanding where we can put students. And I also heard at one point you indicated the fact that we might even have to change a teacher or two around just to be able to get that 1 or 2 extra kids in. So it wasn't even like we were just painting with a broad brush. We were really trying to squeeze as much as you could into each classroom. I appreciate that. And then I know there was a lot of conversation about the time between classes, but I appreciate the fact that you were able to have discussions about that and come up with a way in which it met the needs of our teachers and our students, whether they were in school or remotely. So, any questions from the board? Well, you gave us a nice heads up to this last week, and I think this puts it out pretty plain here. So again, knowing that we're trying to move in this direction, of course, we're fighting I guess, almost the tide in what the numbers are doing outside of our building, even though we're doing a great job in here. You know, with the board's consent, I believe this, go ahead, Mrs. Hanson.
I actually did have a question for Mr. Belekis. I'm having the same problem. You had said that West End's situation is a little unique among the elementary schools. Could you elaborate on that a little bit with respect to the facility?
Sure. So originally, West End School had more students who decided to participate in the Green Remote program. So there are more students to return to West End School. And if all of the students do choose to come back, we cannot fit them all, depending on the grade level, into our existing classrooms. And since that is the case, we would open up an additional section on that grade level in another space to accommodate those children. So it would be basically opening up another section for that grade. And there are 3 grade levels at West End that, again, if everyone decides to come back, that would be necessary for.
And that's what I mentioned. In one of the rooms, we needed to actually build a wall and create a room, and we're in the process of doing that now.
So we're still achieving the same end, where at West End, the kids have the opportunity to come back. It's just they may be in a different section and they may have a different teacher.
Yeah, so basically everybody that's returning, you know, should not expect to have the same teacher. You know, obviously, if you're returning to an in-person class, there's a good chance that you'll have a different teacher because they've been teaching in person the entire time. If you're coming off the remote, you may have your teacher, you may not. We also may have teachers that move in one direction or the other, from in-person instruction to remote or vice versa. And because of that, you know, again, there really should be no expectation to keep your own teacher. If you are full remote, you know, and we do collapse the section, again, that may cause a change of teacher. So we're doing everything in our power to allow people to make a decision and to honor that decision, but there's a lot of moving parts that are involved with that. So that's just something that, you know, to be fair, that everybody just needs to realize that there are moving parts and teachers may change.
Even for kids who are currently in school 5 days, could their teacher change?
Most likely not if you're in person, because of the fact that there is obviously space in that classroom for you. So there's no real reason for me to move that unless the teacher themselves decides that, you know, I have a medical condition, we're adding more people into my classroom space, I'd like to teach remote. So that would be a reason why an in-classroom person would change, but most likely would leave the kids in that classroom, given the fact that they fit in there, you know, throughout the year for that grade level. You know, at the secondary level, though, that could be very different. You know, when you're teaching a secondary class, and let's say you have an English classroom that can hold 25 students, I have a math classroom that can only hold 18, I had 16, now I have 20, and you only are going up to 17, we may switch rooms to, you know, make the classes married to rooms that actually fit the children. And that's why there's a lot of moving parts at the secondary level, and especially in the high school where we have some very tiny rooms, may necessitate a lot more creativity to do a full examination of how any of that stuff would work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I think on behalf of the board, we're extremely grateful from the work that was put into this. I know the students were involved in this, our teachers were involved, our staff, our community members, so I think that's one of the things, again, that just reinforces why this is such a great place, Lynbrook, to have that many people involved. I know the process isn't easy. I know there's a lot of differing opinions on what to do, but in the end, the idea is to continue to move ourselves forward, keep advancing what we're trying to do to educate our kids the best we can, so the board's very appreciative of that. I'm comfortable with these recommendations and moving forward. The rest of the board, Ms. Yeager, Ms. Polsky? Yep. So I think we have consensus on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's continue to do so. Moving along with the agenda. We're going to go to new business first, Dr. Burak, before I get to. So under new business, each year NASA BOCES invites districts to appoint a representative to their budget review committee. Meetings will be held virtually on December 10th, January 14th, and 27th. Would anyone like to participate? Mrs. Pascoff. There'd be a big fight amongst the board members for that position, so your hand went up first, so we're happy to point you to that. Thank you, Mr. Pascoff. And next, as we get into Dr. Burek's superintendent report, I know you're going to do a COVID update, so it's interesting how the conversation we just had about our reopening plans, where it's the goals of this board and this district, and I think most people in the community, if not all, to get our kids back into school, to educate them the best we can, but the big obstacle we have there is COVID and the rising numbers we have in our town. We can't ignore that. So the idea of what we're trying to do, we can't ignore the fact that that's happening outside of our buildings. And Dr. Burek, if you can expand on that, please.
Sure. So every day we watch the numbers and we watch the infection rate. Sadly, I've been on the phone with the local Nassau County Department of Health every single day for the past month, to the point where today was actually a day I did not have to call my liaison, and she called me because she wanted to update me. And, you know, it's a really serious conversation. Nassau County Department of Health is watching Lynbrook School District very closely. We have a total of 33 cases now within our school district. In fact, when you look at our immediate surrounding area, because you have to look up each district individually, so I looked up every surrounding area, we are the highest in comparison to every district. Even a district that's double our size in student population has less COVID cases than we do. So that's a bit alarming for us. I also need to share with you that the New York State Department of Health is watching Lynbrook Public Schools very carefully. They have called me 3 times. To try to get more information, to try to find out what's going on, why are our numbers so high. So we're on the radar for both the local Department of Health as well as the State Department of Health. As Mr. Belmont has said several times tonight, we are trying to keep our school district open as much as we possibly can, as long as we possibly can. But it is a true community effort, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, we've been saying this from the beginning. The choices we make are going to directly impact whether our schools can stay open or not. I know people get upset that we're on remote when we have to switch to remote, but there's a tremendous amount of contact tracing that has to be done, and there is a tremendous amount of coverages. If people want full disclosure, you need to know that there's a tremendous amount of juggling that goes on to try to get coverages when we have to contact trace. And if we have a particular individual who's a COVID positive individual, and we trace, and it may impact 5 or 6 other staff members, and in less than a 24-hour period, you have to make sure you have manned all of those classes. It's just simply the truth to share that information with you. Substitutes, additional bodies to try to come into schools during a pandemic are few and far in between. This is a complaint that county-wide we are seeing. I had a county meeting today with all of the superintendents, and we are all complaining about the same thing. We cannot find individuals to come in and cover classes for when we have a large number of people who are in quarantine. So it's just the truth that I share with you. If we want to collectively keep our schools open, we need to please make smart choices on the weekends and in our social gatherings.
You know, Dr. Burke, as you say that, you know, the other way to look at it is people don't understand we closed the school, and I know you mentioned it, and we'll get further into it. The contact tracing was originally supposed to be done by the governmental agencies in the Department of Health. They're the ones who were supposed to do that. So if on a Saturday you got a positive test in your family or someone in one of your kids, you're supposed to call the Department of Health. They're the ones that get the information. You're not calling them. They were supposed to do the contact tracing. They are not. So when we close our school down, it's not because something happened in our school. It's because our staff has to go through the extensive process of doing contact tracing, pulling out classes, figuring out who sat where. It's extremely time-consuming, and it has nothing to do with what took place in the school. But that requirement becomes on our staff to actually spend that time doing that. So I can't stress enough that we're all in agreement about the fact that we want to stay in school and keep educating our kids, and the schools appear to be a safe place to be. But if everything around us continues to go in that direction, it ties our hands and cuts off what we're able to do.
And just to share with you, the local health department, when she calls me and she lets me know, as Mr. Belmont just said, we give names, but they do when they have the time, because they are far delayed than we are. In fact, she praised me again today because she has felt that we have handled all of our contact tracing appropriately, that we have been able to contact the families in a much more timely manner to quarantine than the Department of Health could ever. But I did ask her, you know, we're taking care of the school part of it. We may not be getting all the information about social interactions outside of school. Are you doing that? So when they do get around to it and the contact tracers do it, they are asking that. But sometimes families are not forthcoming with that information. But so I just again ask, please be forthcoming, because that's only going to help identify people and help mitigate the spread so that we can once again continue to keep our buildings open. So also, at this point, we have a lot of people requesting to go on remote for the next 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. And I get that, because you want to be able to have Thanksgiving. And if you're bringing a grandma or a grandpa in, even though New York State has said, please don't, please limit it to your household. If you're planning on doing that, you don't want to bring it in. I would just ask that if you're asking for that remote now because you want to protect your family for Thanksgiving, please then do the same thing after Thanksgiving to protect everyone in the school district, the staff and the students when you come back. Because if you are intermingling with people outside of your household contact, you are then risking everyone after that interaction for the possible spread. So
Dr. Pierre, what you're really alluding to is the possibility that one of the considerations for the administration, and I guess in conjunction with the board, would be to just go ahead and close the school down after Thanksgiving. But our hope is that we don't have to do that.
Right, we don't want to do that.
Right, but if we find out that after Thanksgiving, we have an increase in numbers that impacts the school, that will be making a statement to us to how we're addressing these issues whenever there are holidays or breaks from school.
Right, so we're opening after Thanksgiving, so I'm just asking people to make smart choices then. If you're going to protect your families prior to Thanksgiving, please help protect the rest of the community after Thanksgiving.
But don't be surprised if we see an increase next week. That may change the manner in which we are able to open up after our winter break.
Do we have any way to check on compliance of quarantine? Like if we tell a family there's been a direct contact, you need to quarantine, we don't have any mechanism of
We don't have any mechanism for that.
compliance?
Just based on conversations, families are, you know, what they're sharing with us, they are doing the right thing, and we
Right.
appreciate that, but as far as saying that that's 100% across the board, I can't say that.
Okay.
But then also part two of this now, because our infection rate is going up the way it is, I'm sure everyone has heard of the zones that exist right now in these micro clusters. So I just want to let you know that when this school district or the 11563 or 11518 or whatever zip code that the Lynbrook Public Schools serves, if we end up in the yellow zone, we have two options. We can very easily close down for 2 weeks, or close down until we come out of the yellow zone, or you've heard that we have mandatory testing that would have to take place of our population. That mandatory testing is 20% over 2 weeks. So for the, let's just say the entire Lynbrook School District, our entire area, the 11563, all of the zip codes involved, say we all fall into a yellow zone. That would mean over a 2-week period, we would have to test 700 people, approximately 20% of our staff and student population. So about 700 tests. We would go out to the community and ask them to please step up, come. If we don't get the 20% volunteering to come and test, we would be forced to shut down. So I think it just being consistent with what we want to stay open, so we would go the route of the testing, but just know it's in the community's hands. Then we need you to step up and come for the testing so that we can stay open. I've already started discussions with a company to come in and set up. They're actually ramping up their staff so that they could support that, and we would set up testing sites within our district boundaries for people to come and get tested so that we would be able to meet that mandate that is handed down by the state. So we're working on that. We're planning. Sadly, it may be coming sooner than we think, but I just want everyone to know that I think our first option is that we want to stay open and do the testing, but again, we need to meet that 20% within 2 weeks, otherwise we will be forced to shut down.
Given that at the rate the numbers are increasing. Do you have a sense of when, if those numbers keep going at the rate they're going, when do we hit the yellow zone?
I can't predict that. I can't predict that right now. For example, Lynbrook High School is at 1.8%. So the threshold is 3%. So how much longer is it going to take to get 1.2? I don't know.
So when you mention that, Dr. Berg, again, we say this multiple times at every meeting because the message has to be clear. And again, this is the only source of accurate information that goes on in the community. It's not Facebook, it's not emails. So the numbers you're talking about that can push us into the yellow zone, and I think afterwards even a red zone, right? There's another layer to that. Has nothing to do with the transmissions in the school. There's no argument, there's nobody debating that. We all agree that the school is a safe place to be. But we are under the controls of the governmental entities that dictate to us based upon what happens outside of us. So although this may be a safe place, if what goes on around us doesn't work out, it's not working out for us here. I just want to make sure I clarify what you're saying as far as zip codes. Is this zones being identified by school district, in which case ours makes up 4 or 5 different zip codes, or is it solely by village zip codes? And the way I clarify that is, let's say Waverly Park happens to be in the East Rockaway zip code. If the village of East, are they looking at it by villages or by school districts?
So it's by zip code. So if 11518 is targeted, but 11563 is not, we would have to test our schools that are within 11518.
Which is a drastically different number if the high school, which may fall in at the same time North does, as compared to Marion Street or East Rockaway. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a sort of theoretical question about that. Marion Street is half in Lynbrook, half in East Rockaway. What happens then?
I think the mailing address was 11563.
So it's based on the mailing address.
And once we hit that zone, what is the time frame by which we have to complete that 20% testing?
2 weeks,
And that includes teachers and students.
correct.
And so I guess we have some time to figure out, get a protocol in place as to what the methodology would be to identifying that population, their participation, and so forth.
Dr. Bjork, just also to clarify, if we hit the 20%, how long before we have to retest the population?
It would be every 2 weeks until we're out of the yellow zone.
The same population, the same people who came in the first time have to come in again?
No, it's got to be a different 20%.
Okay.
Which raises the question, if you continue to
Because
stay
it's
in the
very-
yellow
it's-
zone, you exhaust that population, you just got to redo that same
Right,
population.
and the reason why I say a different, because right now, depending on what health insurance plan you have, health insurance companies are only paying for 1 COVID test a month. So within a 3-week, 4-week period, you may be hitting 2 times and you may get rejected.
And this is mandated by the state or the county? The
New York State, New York State Department
Which
of Health.
is frustrating, Ms. Hanson, because the fact remains, we can have our entire student population come up with not 1 test, but because the village is still at a higher number, we fall into the yellow zone. So we could be doing everything we're supposed to do in school, have not 1 teacher, 1 staff member, or student with a positive test, and we'd still have to keep testing them, but at least we could stay open. The idea is they're just requiring, at this point, the state's only requiring we test. They're not trying to shut us down at that point. But if we move
Not if you're in the yellow zone.
Right, if you're in the red zone, we do get shut down.
Another question, real quick. If a student gets tested, is that student eligible to be tested again 2 weeks later? Or, because I would imagine any family willing to have their child tested would be an asset to the district to help keep us open.
Right, it just, once again, it boils down to will the health insurance cover the multiple in a month?
Okay.
And by the way, those are protocols we're facing today. And who knows what the state will come up with for us and what they may change those zones to be. But the reality is, everywhere we look, they're telling us numbers continue to increase. And didn't New York City just decide they're closing tomorrow, right?
Yes,
And Dr. Bjork, that's 20% of staff and 20% of students, not 20% of staff and students.
correct. Right, so you can't have 100% of the staff do it and meet your 20%.
Right.
Right.
Well, wait, just clarify that for me. So it's a combination of the two, or 20% of staff and 20% of students?
Separate.
It's 20% of your
Each
staff
one.
and students,
Wow.
yes. Okay, the next item on the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Belekas again for the professional development update.
Thanks again, Dr. Bjork. Earlier today, I had the pleasure and privilege of meeting with a very basically dedicated group of teachers. They form the Lynbrook Teacher Center Policy Board, and Mrs. Kern is an administrative member of that group as well. And we had a great discussion regarding professional learning opportunities for staff. I know that one of the board goals this year is promoting inclusive practices and celebrating diversity, and we talked about learning opportunities to support that. We started exploring possible outside partnerships where we could work with outside organizations, have them train key staff members that could come in and provide turnkey support for the rest of our staff. We also discussed some book titles that we could use as focal points for collegial circles, again, to open up that dialogue among our staff members. So these conversations will continue, and we will be all taking notes and exploring these opportunities further and reconvening in January to discuss our next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Belekas. And before I turn it over to Dr. Lynch for the capital projects update, I just want to point out to everyone, we've put additional pictures on our website for the bond update. I hope people who are interested in construction are taking a look at the bond website, because there are some amazing pictures that were taken by drone on the top of all of our construction projects. So you see all of the HVAC work on top of the elementary schools for the gymnasiums. You see the exterior of the elevator at Waverly Park. But you see amazing pictures of the construction of this addition going on. It's truly amazing. So I hope you have an opportunity to take a look at those pictures. And then, Dr. Lynch?
That's a great preview, Dr. Burek. So yes, the HVAC projects at Marion Street and West End are complete and have been fired up, and they should be ready to go. The Waverly Park elevator, we're in the punch list stage, so that's pretty much ready to go also. I had the privilege of walking the site today, so I actually walked the big high school site. I stood in the footprint of the innovation room. I stood in the footprint of the band room. I stood in the footprint of our CDP room. So these are real things right now. The masons are on site. The walls are going up. We hope to have the walls completed by the time the snow comes around. So hopefully we're in good shape there. So things are proceeding well. And then just time to start another one. The Marion Street elevator will be going out to bid sometime in January or February.
Great.
Dr. Lynch, have we closed the gap at all? I know, like, when we lost all that time, because of, in the beginning in March with the pandemic, and we lost a lot of that construction time. Were we able
I don't want to give an enthusiastic yes, we close, because it all depends, when you're dealing with construction. I think the progress is going very well. Let's put it that way. That's the answer I would give to that.
That's fair. Okay, thank you. That's my report.
Excellent. Anything else from the board on these issues?
I actually have a question. Given the conversation we just had about the yellow zone and followed by Dr. Lynch's facilities capital projects report, if we go into the yellow zone and we have to shut down the school, do the sites shut down, and can we have,
No, you can
if we
continue
go into
construction.
red and we have to shut down, do we have to shut down these capital projects as well?
I don't
No.
believe so. I want to check with council, but I don't believe so.
And just to follow up on that issue, if we do reach a point where the government comes in and shuts down, will teachers have the option of utilizing the classroom if they so choose, or that will depend upon what the
It'll
rules
depend
are?
on the nature of the order. I mean, I think we're predisposed to, we would love the buildings to stay open.
Right,
That's,
right.
we don't want it to be like the spring. I think that, if I speak for everyone.
And I think it's helpful I've mentioned that to Todd Kaminsky once before. It'd be helpful whenever we interact with our representatives to let them know the importance of staying open and to give us at least that option if our teachers so choose. Anything else on the board? Before we get to public comment, I'm going to read two sympathy resolutions we have, unfortunately, this evening. First one is for Loretta Taravella. Whereas the members of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District have learned with sorrow of the recent passing of Loretta Taravella, former secretary in the Lynbrook School District, and whereas Mrs. Taravella served as senior stenographer for 17 years, from 1973 through 1990 at Lynbrook High School, and whereas the Board of Education is mindful of the contributions made to our district by Ms. Taravella during her years of service to our community, be it resolved that the Board of Education records its sorrow its sympathy, and the esteem in which Ms. Taravella was held. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the family of Ms. Loretta Taravella with the hope that they will find solace and comfort in the rich heritage of good works for which she is remembered and revered. So these will be part of the consent agenda? Thank you. Richard Creasy, whereas the members of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District have learned with sorrow of the recent passing of Richard Creasy, former head custodian in the Lynbrook School District, and whereas Mr. Creasy served as assistant head custodian and head custodian from 2002 through 2005 at Marion Street Elementary and North Middle School. And whereas the Board of Education is mindful of the contributions made to our district by Mr. Creasy during his years of service to our community. Be it resolved that the Board of Education records its sorrow, its sympathy, and the esteem in which Mr. Creasy was held. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the family of Mr. Creasy with the hopes that they will find solace and comfort in the rich heritage of good works for which he is remembered and revered. As indicated, those resolutions will be done during consent agenda this evening. At this time, we're going to move to public comment. At the front of the room, there is a podium. If you'd like to address the board, please come up to the podium. Identify yourself as someone that lives in or out of the district, and address your issue.
Does this come off? Can you show me how? Okay, good. Good evening. My name is Larry Abrahams. I'm a Lynbrook School District person that has been living here for 20 years. My school taxes are currently $26,000. About 2 weeks ago, something on social media came through to my home that has been actually driving me pretty wild, and I'll read it what it said. By one of our school board members. What to post today? Trump just keeps adding fuel to the fire for this history buffs among us. Look at the comparison of Trump and Hitler. Do we want history to repeat itself? Not that history. Election day is 5 days away. Please make a good choice. One of our esteemed board members chose to say something like that. Let me give you a little history, my friend. My grandparents lost 12 siblings, and I lost 6 great-grandparents. What were you thinking? I'd like to know what you were thinking to have the audacity to put something up like this. You know what you were thinking? You were thinking that you were going to get a positive review, and what it did was it bit you in the ass. Let me tell you something. At first, when I saw this, I wanted you fired, but then I calmed down. I said to myself, it's better that you stay here because you're going to own this for the next 10, 20 years. When you go to a restaurant, when you go to the park, they're going to know, part and parcel, this is you. And what bothers me about this school district is, if this was somebody that was black or Muslim, this guy would be gone. We all know that. Let me tell you something. Social media has a way of getting around, and it's going to be a pity when your physical therapy practice knows about this. Hang this up, my friend, because let me tell you something. You are going to own it. You are going to own it. Shake your head. Let me tell you something. Small in stature, small in character, you're a piece of shit.
Why does this guy like why? Sit down. Freaking fool. What a freak show.
My name is Bill Murenberg, school district resident, taxpayer. I'd like to echo some of the things that the previous speaker said, but on behalf of so many Lynbrook School District residents who are not here tonight, regardless of their political affiliation or religion, we are all appalled, angry, and upset, bewildered as to how you could post something so insensitive, intentionally inflammatory, misleading, and as disgusting as this comparison of the most heinous murder in human history to a sitting president. I demand that you immediately resign from your position and issue a public apology, although I know that's not going to happen.
Bye.
Being that there are no other public comments, there is other public comment. Yeah, we don't take names, so as soon as you see an opportunity, please come on down to the microphone.
I just wanted to, I'm going to shift gears a little
If you
bit.
could please just identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Dr. Mohammed Ghafoor. I'm the parent of 3 kids in the Lynbrook school system. I have a son in the kindergarten center, and I have a son and a daughter at Lynbrook South. My older 2 are in hybrid, and my youngest is going every day. I'm also a pediatric critical care physician, and I spent most of February and March and April taking care of very sick kids and adults with COVID because the adult ICUs overflowed into my ICU. So I understand the fear that the teachers are facing with COVID. I also understand about quarantine because I quarantined myself from my family for those 2 months while this was going on. I was also on the Health and Facilities Subcommittee, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on that committee. And I just want to kind of echo what some of you guys have said and put it all together. I mean, look, there are COVID cases in every school except for Waverly and the kindergarten center, and there are more cases to come. And I feel like we have to applaud that the school is very safe, is that there have been no spread of cases within the schools. All the cases have been in the community, and then the kids are showing up in school with those cases, but then when they show in, it's not spreading in the schools. So I think, in that sense, I agree that, the plan of bringing more kids in is a good idea. Like I said, my kids are going in hybrid. I value the education. However, the main issue to me is, like I said, I do support all these plans about bringing more kids in, but I think it's a partnership between the school and the community. And the more kids that come in, the more kids that are going to come in positive with coronavirus versus being at home with coronavirus, right? Because if you're hybrid, half the time you could be tested, you could be positive at home, on a weekend, what have you. But now there'll be more kids coming in with coronavirus. So it's really important, and I'm going to be a little more blunt than what you guys are saying is, look, if you shouldn't be having 20 kids over at your house at a party. And I get it. My kids play sports. They're outside. They wear masks whenever they're possible. Nobody's perfect. I'm not saying my kids are perfect, but we take, we're very serious about these precautions, and I feel like, the folks in the district need to be serious about these precautions. That's what I just want to say.
Thank you, Doctor.
Hello, my name is Keith Gutstein. I'm a resident of the district. Rob, how are you? Rob, I got to be honest with you. I wasn't planning on coming here today. I've always known you, always respected you. Our kids were in school together and friends. You crossed the line. I know people are kind of minimizing it. Someone just said bye rudely when the other gentleman just walked out, which I think was pretty disgusting and disrespectful myself. But nonetheless, you posted something comparing President Trump to Hitler. You may not like President Trump, and that's fine. We all know what Hitler did. You know I'm a member of the Holocaust Center in Nassau County. I'm part of the executive committee. I can assure you that tomorrow they're going to know what happened, and we think we're going to sweep this under the rug. It's not going to happen, I can assure you. It is an embarrassment. All we do as a Holocaust Center is teach people, teach kids. 63% of millennials in a recent survey didn't even know that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Your ignorance perpetuates that, and you should be aware of that. And we're not going to let that die. We're not going to ignore it. But your ignorance is an embarrassment to this community. That is the ultimate saying. That's what I want to leave with. Everyone listening, streaming or here, your ignorance is an embarrassment. You should apologize to the district at the very least. Would you like to apologize, Rob? Your silence is deafening, Rob. Your silence is deafening. Just like those that allowed for the Holocaust to happen. Your silence is deafening.
Hi, Ivy Riley. I want to thank you for getting the committees together and working on a plan. I know I had a lot to say last time. I don't have as much to say right now, but I do appreciate the hard work that goes into it. As I've sat on many committees in the past, I chose not to even attempt to be a part of these because I thought it would be great to have new faces on these committees and new voices, and it seems like that happened, and that there are some really good things that are going to come out of it. I know that we are on an uptick, and the fear of COVID is at a high right now, and that we may not get through this winter without having our kids at home again. But I'm grateful that all the kids have computers. My daughter could not be happier being in 5th grade, being one of those children that had to move into a different classroom. They adjust, they're resilient, but now you gave them a tool. She knows her Schoology, she's very well versed in it, she feels comfortable, and with everything that's going on, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen even tomorrow. So the fact that it's an ongoing effort is appreciated by at least some of us. I do want to ask if we can work on the consistency issue. For instance, in South Middle School, we were advised that there was a teacher and a child that had COVID and that we would be shut down for contact tracing, but then we weren't advised that a lot of the teachers would continue to be remote. And I don't know that it mattered so much, but it's just one of those things in, this whole COVID world, that when we find out that our kids aren't in school, our kids are going back to school and the teachers aren't there because they're remote, because they're quarantined, it's confusing for us, I think, because we talk about how there's not enough staffing and there's not enough teachers to cover classrooms, which when I was here last month and I said, well, could we put kids in the gym and have them remote on some days where the class is too full to fit kids? And you said that there was not enough staff. So I worry that if, say, 10 staff members are out quarantining or choose to quarantine, I don't know if that's an option, I'm making it up. But I just want to, I think we just need to be aware that our children will be in school, there'll be a sub, there'll be something different happening. I don't agree with the 8 minutes. I wish it was shorter. Can't do anything about it, but I think when the kids are remote, that gives them a little time to do homework or play games and get involved in other things or walk around and go to the refrigerator. When they're in school, I'm told by my own child that 8 minutes is a really long time. And the minutes are, they're critical when we have to think about Regents, AP exams, and things like that. So I'm hoping that as time goes on, the 8 minutes will be reconsidered and reduced again if it's warranted. I will say one more thing. I particularly think that someone that is a public figure should be very careful about spewing their political beliefs when they represent this school district. As a Jewish woman who also has a very common last name and lost many of my ancestors who I never would have gotten to know in the Holocaust, I am very well educated in the Holocaust and in World War II history. I'm kind of appalled by the post, and I will say no more other than that when you are a member of the Board of Education, you really should consider the fact that you are representing an entire district, and you should be very careful about things that you say publicly, and your political beliefs that have nothing to do with this school district do not belong in a public forum where you look like you are a voice of the community. Because Mr. Paskoff, I have always liked you, but I feel very, very disappointed in what you displayed. And I know it was not the only post. There were many posts. I actually not blocked you, but I froze you or whatever it is for 30 days, so I didn't have to look at them anymore. And we've had a conversation up here, what was it, 2 months ago, Mr. Melvant, where you told me that school board doesn't belong on Facebook. And you can't talk about things about school board on Facebook because it's not the appropriate setting. So I just urge anybody that is on this school board, once you step foot onto that stage and you become a member who is representing all of us, all of our children, and all of these parents, you pay attention to what you're saying, and if you can't own it, then you really should not be putting it up there. And I'll leave it at that because I'm going to be respectful, unlike the people before me, but I understand their anger. So thank you.
Good evening. My name's Andy Lunar. I have 2 children in the district, one in 8th grade and one in 4th grade. I also sat on the facilities committee or subcommittee that was recently formed that worked on the recommendations that we saw. The board knows I'm very in favor of reopening. I'm very in favor of bringing the kids back full time. I think it's necessary. I think it's important. But I think even me and the 250 families that are kind of in this loose group that we formed that are really pushing the school board to bring the kids back recognize that we're in a situation now with the yellow zone or being on the border of a yellow zone where that may not be possible for several weeks and maybe longer than that. I think we all realize that. The only thing that we would ask is that we don't let the time pass to come up with a plan. Just because the kids can't come back for several weeks doesn't mean we can't start having a plan ready to bring them back the day that the numbers go down low enough to allow us to do so. So that's what I would ask the board, to continue the work of the prior committees and not to allow any further delays. I sat on one of the task forces. I think the task force was a very useful exercise. There was a lot of very spirited discussion on it. Between the teachers, the administrators, and the parents on the board. My personal recommendation would be that those task forces should remain in place. We don't need to have a new task force formed. It's better for the existing task forces to continue their work than to have a new task force get up to speed. There's a continuity there. I think, while I was not necessarily ecstatic with all the recommendations, I think we could have shrunk the space between students a lot more under New York State guidelines to bring more kids back sooner. I still think we got to compromises in that committee, and so to start from scratch just seems silly to me. The last point I'll just briefly address is the 8 minutes break between class. I was actually one of the strong advocates of cutting it to 5 or 6 minutes quickly. I actually think the 8 minutes actually strikes a pretty good balance. We had a committee meeting, and actually, I think it was Mr. Kirschenberg, who's in the audience, brought up a very different point on it, which is these kids are starved for socialization. They're not really getting to hang out as much outside of school or inside of school. That 8-minute time frame actually gives the kids some time to hang out. They're 5 feet or 6 feet apart. They're wearing masks, but they're still hanging out and just talking to each other. I went back and I actually asked my own son, who's in middle school, what do you think about it? And he said, oh, don't cut those breaks down. That's actually a nice time. We sit, we talk, we basically hang out because they're not doing it outside of school. So I actually think for this time frame, that works. Maybe as things progress, we look to shorten that down in the future as the kids are doing more hanging out in different settings. But I think for now, that's actually a good compromise. But my real takeaway is I just want to urge the board to continue to move quickly on the plan for the bringing back all the students. Just because it can't happen now doesn't mean we can't have the plan now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joanne Andriassi. I'm in the district and my children go to school normally at Marion Street. They are learning remotely this year, and in October, before the last meeting, I spent 3 or 4 hours writing a letter that summarized all of my disappointment and issues with the plan as it had been implemented at that time. I didn't get a response. I guess I didn't realize that if I send a letter to the board, I don't get a response, that it should have been maybe directed to Dr. Burak or the principal, and maybe I'll take the time to redirect that at some point. I thought maybe I would touch on some of those points, but at this juncture, it seems that once some of the people here took the oxygen out of the room, I don't even really know that I feel like getting into all of those things at this time. And a lot of them have been addressed. I know that there's a plan now going forward. I did want to send my children back to the school. My main issue right now and my question is, or my request going forward, is for you to think more about the fact that there needs to be, you mentioned earlier that the board and the district have been fluid and flexible. The situation calls for that. The situation regarding the virus is fluid. It's going to continue to change, as we've all noted tonight, that there's an uptick. It's possibly going to continue. It's happening all around the country. Is it going to come back to this state as you know, in earnest as it was earlier? It could. We don't know. I am not comfortable making a decision now that is going to stick for the rest of the year. That was going to be my big battle when this was first being put together over the summer. And then we were told, actually, no, you're not coming back at all. We've already addressed how terrible that was, but going forward, right now, 2 weeks ago, absolutely I wanted my children to go back. Now, I still want them to go back, but there's a hesitancy because this situation is changing. I recognize that the buildings here are different from a building in an adjacent district. I don't care. Every student in this district deserves, is entitled to, and must be allowed to come back. If today they're telling you that they're not going to come back all year, next month that may change. 2 months, that may change. In the spring, maybe a better situation, and that may change again. The plan cannot just be based on the number of children that you're being told are coming back right now, because this district teaches its children, and it must be prepared to teach its children. I love the fact that there's a plan right now being put together to deal with the situation that is currently at hand. Now, get started on what the next plan is going to be when it changes again. There has to be an end game. There has to be a long-term goal of what we're going to do when everybody comes back. And guess what? Maybe in 6 or 7 or 8 months, it's going to change again. We have to continue to be flexible. To that end, I would also ask, I don't know if it's been raised. I talk about it in my circles, my own circles. I'm just curious, at any point, has it ever been explored whether or not it's possible to open the administrative building to students, some portion of it, all of it? Maybe the administrative duties get taken out into a temporary location. We're all working at home temporarily. There may be some other space that can be rented temporarily. It seems like a pretty big space. I don't really understand why, and maybe it was explored. But if not, I think it should be, especially if we are going to eventually bring everybody back. And when we do that, we may not be able to do that in the way that we did traditionally. That's all. Thank you very much.
So before I get into the ending of the meeting, again, which has to be constantly reinforced, is our end goal is to get all our students back. And the district has, the administration and our staff with their committees and on a daily and weekly basis continually monitored what took place. So as we indicated with the yellow zone, what the state decides, what the Department of Health decides, what the county decides is constantly changing. but the administration is constantly monitoring what's going on. Currently, there is absolutely no pathway for us, because of the state rules, that enables us to bring everybody back into the building. As soon as that happens, with the same speed that that decision is made, this district is prepared to make those changes and adapt ourselves to what has happened. So I think the district is doing a great job. We're grateful for the time and effort put into that, but we rest assured that we are staying on top of it. As you indicated and has been mentioned, is a very fluid situation. It has been from March, and we are constantly monitoring it. And every opportunity we have to get as many kids back into school that want to be in school is something we will continue to pursue. As we move into the superintendent's recommendations, before that, I want to acknowledge that the Lynbrook Board of Education gratefully acknowledges a donation of a Ludwig accent drum set and accessory percussion valued at $600 to be consigned to the North Middle School from the Lucchese family. Moving on to recommendations, I'd like to ask for a consent agenda on resolutions 2011 C1 through 2011 C10 and 2011 NC13 through 2011 NC16, 2011 G8 through 2011 G47, and 2011 R1 through 2011 R3. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Paskoff, second. Mr. Yeager, can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mrs. Hanson, second. Mr. Yeager, all in favor? Thank you. Our next meeting is
December 9th? December 9th?
December 9th, correct. So appreciate that. Everyone have a safe and enjoyable Thanksgiving, and look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.